guess who's back? Your boy, your favorite airman, Josh White. And if you're watching this, you're going to notice something very, very different about my appearance, in that my nose is twice the size. Wow. I want to give a shout out to Mark Criswell at the Eglin Air Force Base Hospital, who helped reconstruct my nose from an early childhood break. And I basically couldn't use my nose anymore on one side. And Dr. Mark Criswell helped me tremendously. So I want to tell him thank you. And for the next 3 months, I'm going to look like this. So sorry. Or not sorry. Maybe you think it's funny. But I'm coming to you today because I got to speak with someone who is a phenomenal human being. I'm talking about Tech Sergeant Kimberly Desilus, who is stationed at Whiteman Air Force Base, Missouri, and she was the wing MRT. So she was in charge of Resiliency, a very unique position to hold as an enlisted member. She got to hold that position for a year and kind of set the way for MRTs behind her. And she was instrumental at keeping us together during COVID ops. There was a lot of pressure put on them to keep morale up and to figure out creative ways to just kind of bridge that gap of human connection that we were missing during those first few months. But what really stands out about her was that she's been on this rocket path to success since she joined the Air Force. And she recently ran into a pretty big hiccup. She had something in her family life happen that really just made her vulnerable, and she made a bad decision, and it came to haunt her really bad, and it started to affect her career in some serious ways. And flash forward to today, she's still going through it, but she's in a much better place now. How does one pick themselves back up after leading the way for the entire wing to deal with the shame of making this mistake? How does one get out of that? And she does such an incredible job at really giving solid advice to anyone going through something like that right now. This is the hero's journey of Tech Sergeant Kim Desilus. Let's get after it. Josh White here. I'm here with one of my great friends, Tech Sergeant Kim Desilus. And before we get started, I'm going to put her through the hero's gauntlet, where I've come up with 3 questions just for her. Question number 1. Are you ready, Kim?
We'll see.
Question number 1. What word sums up your past year?
Challenge.
Oh, dang. Okay. Question 2. What book do you constantly return to? Not just like 1 or 2 reads, like 3 or 4. Something you always go back and want to read or think about often.
I think this year would probably be, if you've heard of the series, Girl Stop Apologizing.
I have.
And Girl Wash Your Face. Those 2 books help. I just read them and they helped me out this year. So
my wife loves those.
they're really good.
Yeah, I see them in because we share an audiobook, the Audible app. So those are 2 that she definitely returns to herself. Shout out to Angie. Question 3, one that I ask often, but I'm really curious to hear what yours is. What is your proudest Air Force moment?
Ooh, that's a difficult one. I have so many. I think, I don't know. There's just so many.
There's not one moment when you think of like, wow, I just feel amazing. I can't believe we did this, or just a huge amount of love thrown at you. Was there any moment where you just felt like, time kind of stood still for you?
I would probably say I played Air Force basketball for the Air Force team, and we took second in the overall tournament. We lost to the Army, but I would probably say that moment was amazing. And then I got to go play in Europe, and we took first in against the NATO nations. And so that felt really amazing too, because we had all these people just come together from across the Air Force, and some of us knew each other, some of us didn't, but we came together as a team and, rocked it.
It's kind of like your own little Air Force Olympics, like your dream team.
Yeah, exactly. Essentially.
How tall are you?
I'm 6'1".
6'1". I look up to you literally and figuratively. I remember when I first met you, I think I had to go to MUNS for some reason. Maybe I was in honor guard looking. I can't remember exactly.
I feel
it had to do with honor guard. There's no other reason I would have been over there. However, I used to be MUNS age there, so I was very familiar with the area. When I said I used to be age, I was at Whiteman. I was in Mun's age. I'd go through the gate with the trailers, the weapon loaders. I worked on those for like 3 years. So I love the area, and I was very familiar with it. So it was kind of cool. It's kind of cool being honor guard and being able to revisit places like that I would have no business in otherwise. And then I remember when I first met you, I was just straight up intimidated by you, like right away.
I don't know why people tell me that. They always tell me like, "Oh, you're so intimidating." Like, I'm just tall. Like,
and you approached me right away. Like, who are you? Like, what are you doing here? Like, what can we help you with? You know what I mean?
I'm very direct and outspoken. I don't know why I probably approached you, but I was probably just trying to get info.
Yeah, I probably came in there, you know, with my head held high, and you were like, let me knock this little 5'6" dude back down to size.
You are not 5'6".
I'm 5'6". Yeah.
Are you?
I'm 5'6". I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. I have boots. I buy particular boots that the TI boots. Those give a lot more height than the other boots do. So that helps. And then my hair gives me a few inches too. But in reality, with no shoes on and my hair down, I'm 5'6". And you know what? I'm okay with that because Tom Cruise is 5'6" and he's in Mission Impossible.
You know what? That's a very good point.
Right.
I feel like that's rehearsed. You've said that a few times, haven't you?
At least 1,000. And one day I will meet Tom Cruise and I will give him a hug. Okay. That is actually a great moment. Chief Wright played basketball too. I'm not sure exactly what level he did. I think he was playing for the Air Force at some point. And he often reflected on that being one of the best times of his life, of his career. You could just see him glowing when he talked about that time of his life. So
my coach in Minot actually played basketball with him.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. And he talked because I did the podcast with Chief Wright. And so when I talked about that, he was like, oh man, he played basketball. He would always come down to Minot and school us. So must have been pretty good.
So you got to interview Chief Wright on the Whiteman Air Force Base podcast. What was that podcast called again?
Practicing the Pillars.
Practicing the Pillars. That's right. Practicing the Pillars podcast. And it's on the Air Force Connect app. That's where you find it. Run me through I'm just curious. I don't know if we ever talked about it, but like, how was that experience? Like, were you nervous? Were you excited? Did the conversation go well? Like,
I was definitely nervous. It was a great experience. Like when you say, give me what is one of your, most proudest or best moments. I mean, that's another one. There's so many that, I've experienced. And that was a very unique experience because not many people get to do that, let alone meet the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force. So being able to do that with him, I was very nervous, and it definitely showed. I had not done the podcast yet. That was my very first podcast. So talk about pressure.
Holy cow.
And I know. And so I had practiced, I just returned from a trip. One of my friends plays soccer professionally. And so she had a game in Chicago, and the night before I was driving back, and it was a pretty late night getting home, but I didn't want to miss out on that opportunity. And then all I did the whole way back was just rehearse my questions I was going to ask him and just kind of play the conversation in my head, but I still was nervous. And it definitely showed. You could hear it in my voice. You could hear it in the way it almost is like a dream. I felt like, if you know what I mean, you could be in a situation or whatever, experiencing something, but you don't really process it in that moment,
An out of body experience.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like you're there, but you're not really there because you're so caught up in whatever that moment is,
I know exactly what you mean. It's like you're watching yourself and you almost don't have complete control over the words coming out of your mouth, which is kind of scary in itself. You know what I mean? You're just kind of just doing it.
I wish I had more. I mean, I look back and I was like, man, I wish I could have done that better, but it was my first one, and it was nerve-wracking. So, but it was a really great experience. And podcast after that was I did get to interview Chief Wright. So after this, all my podcasts should be pretty smooth, and they actually were. I was able to kind of rely back on that to become better and kind of grow from that experience. So
I did listen to that one. I can't remember exactly everything discussed, but I did listen to it. I thought you did great. I thought I didn't pick up on any maybe like a little bit at first, but I thought overall you did really good. And I think we're self-critical like that because I was a guest on one when I first got stationed here. And this is before I started my own podcast with Chief Vasquez, Bob Vasquez. He's an author. He works at the academy. He's very well known in the Air Force. And so, of course, I was pretty nervous because I figure he has a pretty decent sized audience. And I thought I just did terrible. I mean, I got off that podcast just like kicking myself. And then it finally released like not even that long ago, like probably like 3 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I listened to it and I was like, oh my God, like I did not even do that bad. Like, why did I think that was so terrible? I think we're just built that way.
Our own worst critic.
Definitely. All right, Kim. So one thing I want to know is, because I didn't even know you played basketball to that level. Let's get a recap on your Air Force career, like just where you grew up, you know, when you joined, what bases you were at, and the things that you kind of had a hand in up to this point.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm originally from Phoenix, well, Glendale, but not everybody knows where Glendale is. So Phoenix, Arizona. And I was born and raised there. I went and played basketball for college. I played at Flagler College for 1 year. I got a scholarship, and so that was in Florida. So left home, went to Florida, played for a year, but I really didn't like it. I went from like a nationally ranked high school to a school that was barely struggling to, you know, win half the games, and our team there wasn't a lot of team cohesion, and I didn't really have a study that I wanted to pursue there. So I ended up leaving after a year, and then I came back and I chose to join the Air Force. After struggling to make ends meet, I realized I needed something else. And I wanted to finish school. So I joined the Air Force in 2009. So I've been in for a little over 12 years, and I was first stationed at Minot Air Force Base. And that was a lovely cold time. It was just about 4 years there. A lot of snow. Had never driven in snow before. So I ended up in the ditch quite a bit. I have a lot of experience in the ditch, to be honest. It's kind of upsetting, but it's definitely prepared me for here at Whiteman.
And you're Global Strike alum.
I know it. Seriously, I feel like once you're Global Strike, they keep pulling you back. So after that, I got blessed though. I got to go to Okinawa, Japan. So I got there. I was there for 4.5 years. And while I was there, I went to become an ADL, an Airman Dorm Leader. When I made staff, I applied and I got a glowing recommendation from my previous chief, who then worked at headquarters, because he knew I really wanted to do something different. So fortunately, got hired for that, did that for 2.5 years, and then I PCSed from there, and then I came here. And I went from having 0 troops to 13 troops, and never had supervised formally before then. So that was very interesting, but it was a blessing because it really made me sit down and manage my time with my people because it was across 3 shifts. So that was really cool. While I was in Japan, that's when I played basketball though. So I played, tried out, and we played at Maxwell, and then I got picked up for the team, and then we went to Camp Pendleton, and we played against all armed forces, so all the branches. And then went back to Japan, and a few months later, I got hit up asking if I would want to go play in England for the NATO tournament. So then I TDY'd to England for 10 days, and I got to play out there, and my plane conveniently got delayed. So I got to stay overnight in London and got to go and kind of explore everything. So that was pretty cool. And then, so here I am.
And you're at Whiteman now.
I am at Whiteman now, and I've been here for almost 4.5 years. It was 4 years in January, so yeah, 4.5 years. And I've worked a couple different sections, but I got to leave my MUN squadron and go be the Wing Resiliency Coordinator for 1 year, which was an excellent growth experience for one of the first times in my career. Next to honestly being an Airman Dorm Leader, I just really felt like I had a lot of purpose, especially being that it was during COVID times. we were kind of looked at to like step up and bring this like connection amongst the community, because we're isolated, people are scared to be around other people, people aren't going to work, routines are messed up, so there was a lot of like social isolation, mental health concerns, and overall connectedness, and also the need for like squadrons to recognize that they needed to stay connected with their people. So I kind of got to step into that role and plan events, do things to kind of promote that social pillar for the resilience of the community. And then just within the last like 8 months, I returned back to MUN. So I've been back in MUN since October, and I guess it's like 6-7 months. And so I'm number 2 over there as the assistant running trailer maintenance. So you talked about pulling trailers through the ECP. Yep, we do the same, but just for different trailers. So
Gotcha. Yeah, that process getting to that ECP is, whew.
I know it is not fun.
You got to get there early, you leave late, trying to go somewhere for an appointment or lunch is just a nightmare.
Let the gate be shut down.
Oh, it's brutal. It is brutal. So good on you. So I want to hear about the wing MRT, being a resiliency trainer for the wing. I want to know, like, that's a rare position to have. There's typically a CSC at every wing.
Yes.
And a few other positions that fall under that CSC that are typically civilians. You don't often see an active duty member placed with that team. It's very rare. So can you tell me about that position, how you got it, what made you, what led you to it, what drove the interest, and how you were selected, and then just kind of your experience running that program and what you learned from it?
Okay. So I became an RTA in Japan, a resiliency trainer assistant, and I didn't do too much with it. I think it was kind of newer, so there wasn't a lot of opportunity yet to like do too much. And plus I didn't really know my scope of involvement, that I could like what I could be doing as an RTA. So I did like minor briefings and stuff. Fast forward, got here, and I retook the RTA training because I knew that there was like some new curriculum information and stuff like that. So retook it, kind of got more involved, started teaching at the wing, teaching FTAC, teaching the future RTA classes. And I worked with the previous wing resiliency coordinator before me. And I guess I made like a good impression on the CSC at the time, the community support coordinator, Bob Striegel, because he asked for me by name to my leadership to go replace the previous wing resiliency coordinator. So I felt very fortunate because that's kind of the realm that I wanted to go in. I just finished my bachelor's degree, was trying to figure out what I wanted to do for my master's, and getting put in that position is what kind of helped push me into my master's degree program. But we went into, I transitioned up to the wing, and then we just started working on different projects, different program implementations across the wing. We're very fortunate because you said that it's it's a position that you don't think many places have. I do agree with that. I think that's kind of a flaw. I think that there should be, because like you said, there's community support, violence prevention, there's other program managers also, but for resiliency, that's part of the community support program, and it's expected that there's a resilience program, and all commanders are charged to have some form of a resilience program or an action plan for resiliency within their squadrons. And so that kind of gives having a wing resiliency coordinator kind of can like step in and provide feedback, can go out to the work centers and see what they're doing, help assist them with what they are, like their trainings, their programs, whether it's like lunch and learns or group gatherings. I believe you and I came out and you guys did like for rock climbing and honor guard, right?
Yeah, we did like a rock climbing / resiliency training, kind of tying in the aspects of rock climbing and how that can translate to like wingmanship.
Mm-hmm. And you guys got that paid for, right? Everybody was able to go. And so also being able to just kind of facilitate the education for the MRTs in the squadron and the commanders that, hey, implement some resiliency focused training, and we'd be able to do some group gathering activities, whether it's like rock climbing or a movie or what is the main event, something like that, right? Where there's just different things that you can do to get your people together and kind of feel a sense of connectedness. So that was really cool, just because I got to see a lot of things that I normally wouldn't see. I got to sit in on a lot of meetings to understand kind of the bigger picture. And I think that's when you're stuck in your career field, you have this narrow view of what the military looks like and like what the military is. And so stepping out, I've really gotten to see the culture of different squadrons and how, I mean, honestly, even in maintenance group like AMXS and MXS and MUNs, we're all still different from each other with the language that we use and the way that we think or speak, all of that. So, and then, I mean, obviously it's going to be even more vastly different from comparing like maybe medical to the maintenance group or security forces or LRS. So everybody's just got their own culture. So I got to like do some assessments of that to kind of tailor resilience programming and resilience implementation into the squadrons specific to the culture of that squadron. So it's very cool that a very cool experience overall.
So what did you learn from that? I mean, you have relationships with people. You've got a lot of networking going on because you're doing these classes, training all these RTAs. You're meeting wing leadership. How did that impact your real life?
So I learned so much from this job. I think one of the biggest takeaways was definitely relationships. Time management, to be honest, I became like a much better time manager, if that's a thing. I really rely on my calendar now. We had so many tasks going on and so many deadlines with stuff before, suspenses and everything. And so I had to really start writing things down and getting organized, because that's not naturally me. I'm not naturally an organized person. But being in that role has really helped me. And I've related back now. It's honestly probably the biggest thing that I took away when it comes to managerial aspects, right? Overseeing a program. Because, I'm back in my squadron now, and I have a whole bunch of people I have to take care of. And every single individual person has a whole bunch of needs. So I need to be able to track and kind of oversee their own individual things that's going on top of the maintenance requirements. So that's helped me a lot. Then, of course, the personal aspect, the relationship aspect, networking and kind of knowing these people. I sat on the violence prevention teams. So there was suicide prevention, alcohol and drug related prevention, incident prevention, and then violence prevention. So I sat on those as well. And so that's a lot of networking with the different positions, because we had the director of psychological health on there. We had captains, lieutenants, even majors coming across all squadrons. And then we also had, like chiefs and seniors. So getting their expertise, their understanding of the way the Air Force works, their own experiences, all of that was really beneficial to help shape my worldview of the Air Force, and like even just how to take care of people, because that's probably my number one goal, regardless of whatever position I'm in.
Was there any MRT tool or lesson that might not have stood out to you before you went through this experience that now you do value? For instance, for me, is being thankful and grateful for what I already have. That and gratitude, I guess, is what the word I'm looking for. Gratitude is mine. Something I never utilized until I got to honor guard, and then I really started being grateful, and just the joy that I was fueled by that, by highlighting others. And that's kind of what led me to this podcast. So that's my own example, my own MRT journey and what it taught me. Is there any particular lesson for you that you now appreciate?
Yes. So I've always appreciated gratitude. I I think I do more so now, not for a personal reason, but kind of like what you said, like you like to highlight other people and give other people that kind of that spotlight, right? I am really grateful for the people around me. They've helped get me to where I am now. Past leaders, even like my subordinates now, right? Like my airmen and my troops right now. They still every single day, like I am in the position I am because of them, you know? And so I'm very grateful for the opportunity, and I lose sight of it sometimes. So when things happen, I get like subtly reminded or very much so drastically reminded that gratitude is something that we need to keep in the center of like our lives. And it could be, I mean, as simple as just like I'm grateful that I'm alive and I get another chance today. And it could be other things like I'm grateful that, you know, maybe I've got extra money in my account that I can go buy a dinner for or something, you know, like there's different things that you can be grateful for and that you can express gratitude to other people, whether it's verbally or, you know, in with external means. So, you know, like maybe providing a meal to the homeless person or something. Right. So,
Yeah, I always like I realized afterwards that it's so much harder to show gratitude than to show, frustrations, I guess.
mhm.
So like it's so much easier to criticize someone or to combat someone. It takes a whole nother level of courage to show compassion and gratitude and to actually say it to the person. It takes way more courage to do that. And it's that I think that's my theory on why it's not as common as it should be, because not everyone's ready to do that. Not everyone's in a place in their life where they can comfortably express that.
Right. I think a lot of that has to do with emotional intelligence, which is something that I wish we would discuss more often in the military. Because to be a leader, you have to be emotionally intelligent, or you're not going to be a strong leader. At least you have to be able to be self-aware of what you feel and what you think. Like if you have biases, you know, maybe like you said, we could critique other people. It's easy to critique other people, but why are we critiquing them? Are we critiquing them out of jealousy? Are we critiquing them because they are where we are not? Is it because somebody else told us about something about this person? So now we just automatically believe this about this person? There's a whole lot of reasons why we kind of go into that negative spiral, and it's just natural. It is 100% a natural thing, you know, negativity bias. Um, we just naturally kind of gravitate to the negative, and it's easier to feed into that. But if we can understand why we're doing it, I think that's when we are most likely to kind of turn that around. And instead of having judgment on somebody or on something, we can kind of find gratitude with it.
Do you ever catch yourself in that negative spiral and then you just,
Absolutely.
pump the brakes for a second? Does that still happen to you?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I feel like because people knew that one, my master's was in mental health, right? So there's that, and then pair it with my experience with resiliency training, resiliency coordination. I think everybody just assumes that I'm like the most resilient person and that I could never have like fall into these little pitfalls or these traps. But that's not true. It's a daily thing. It is something that one I had to learn how to kind of combat those negative thoughts or feelings that just kind of occur. It could be like with master results, right? That just came out and was not selected for master, and I knew I wasn't going to be, as we will soon discuss. But it was hard to, you know, feel gratitude for these other people, and especially the people that were still deserving, you know, everybody made it, they were deserving, but to the people that I knew for sure, and I was like, man, they are definitely deserving, and I still had like a hard time allowing positive thoughts to be there because, you know, I was sad for myself and I was upset for myself because I put myself in this position. And I think that's common, right? Especially with promotion. We want to be there for others and celebrate with them, but sometimes we get stuck in our own, you know, whatever it is that we're feeling about it too.
Yeah, and in today's time, the promotion stuff,
Mhm.
the good news in general is, especially if you came up short, is very,
Mhm.
very challenging because I've never seen such a focus on making rank like today. Like today, it's everywhere. It's in your face. That Facebook algorithms promote good news. It knows their AI knows good news by the picture, by the word used. And so therefore it's going to make its way to a lot of feeds. And so to
Yep.
come up short, and then you can't even glance at your phone without seeing 1,000, pictures of that master stripe, of the
Mm-hmm.
cakes and the stripes that they're, posing with their commander, and the surprise, and you can't get away from it. I mean,
So
aside
true.
from deleting the app for like 2 weeks, you cannot escape it. And so in today's time, coming up short is absolutely brutal,
Mm-hmm.
because you're not just seeing the one person in your section that made it, you're seeing hundreds of people.
All your friends across, and you want to be, you want to be glad for them and happy for them. But it's definitely difficult if it's a sore spot for you at that moment, the person that's maybe tried 4, 5, 6 times, and the person that was, kind of thinking that they would, but then they don't. And it's not just in that sense, right? It could be in other senses. In society has such a thing for putting all this pressure on people. You need to get married by a certain time. You should own a house by a certain time. You should have a degree. You should have children, like all these things. And so if you're not meeting these, like, the social construct of expectations for you as a person, you're 34 but you don't have kids and you're not married, but you see all these other people that are having families and like settling down and stuff. And in the military, that's hard because it's hard to settle down, with not just like a family, but it's hard to settle down like planning routes, buying a house, and kind of getting comfortable because we up and leave so often. But uh, but we see that all the time. We see it in our face all the time. And it's hard because we want to celebrate these other people, but then we feel like we're not meeting our own expectations, or really the expectations that society puts on us.
Right. I felt that way too. I came up short with, I mean, I'd say I chased master pretty hard. I got to a point where I gave up, and that's, ironically when it worked out. And now I'm just not going to put myself through that anymore. I've been through it, the rank chasing, and I'm not going to do it anymore. I've met my goal. I'm content. But I know how it feels. I definitely know how it feels. I came up short. I made master my 4th time. I made tech my 1st time.
Mm-hmm.
So, I had that on my mind, like, I can do this. I can just keep rolling, rocking and rolling. But then, everything changed with how you make master, and you kind of really have to go above and beyond, and special duties are involved in how you stand out, and it gets really competitive, next level competitive. And, I was absolutely crushed time and time again. And I was bitter the first few times I came up short. I became increasingly bitter. And one of my rules that I live by is no one promotes a jerk. So if you're that bitter person, you're only hurting yourself. No one wants to promote that bitter person, beating themselves up and mad at the world. No one's going to want to promote that person. When I forced myself to, instead say, congratulations, and try to really be happy for them and try to really celebrate them, I kind of feared that would make me feel worse. But it actually made me feel a lot better about it. It made me feel more comfortable in my own skin. I'm showing this person love, and eventually that love will make its way back to you somehow, some way.
Absolutely.
But that when I changed my mindset and I got out of my comfort zone and started celebrating those individuals, even when my gut was telling me not to, I've just felt so much better and just at peace with myself.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, I'm sure that's a social theory out there somewhere.
I'm sure it is. You get what you give.
Absolutely. Karma, right?
Yep. So
negative way.
You're rocking and rolling as the wing MRT. You are flying high. You're probably the top 5 most known people on the wing, I would say, because of your position, because of the lives you've touched. The position just enabled you to be part of the community. That was what you were charged to do. And so therefore you had a lot of success with that, right? Like your career was kind of just going up and up and up at this point. Yes. And unfortunately, and this can happen to anyone, I don't care where you're at in your life. If you're the golden child or if you're the problem child, you're always going to be vulnerable to a slip up, a lapse in judgment. It's when we become really vulnerable and there's just kind of too much going on up here where we might make that lapse of judgment, and it can cost us sometimes. It's really hard to bounce back. I've been there plenty of times. And here recently, you went through that as well.
Yes.
I want to hear about what happened in your life that led you down that path.
Okay. So, um, like you said, everything was just kind of going up. I definitely had a very strong outlook. I was planning that like master would be in my future this year. And I loved what I did. You know, I was loving the work that I was doing. I was very passionate about it. Um, and so like following that, right? Uh, my career's a pretty big aspect of my life. And then also like my personal life, right? We have like kind of that, we always talk about like work-life balance, right? As if it's the only two things, but there's so much encompassing in each. So yeah, my family life, my personal life, family matters, all that type of stuff, is another big aspect in my life. And so
So you could say your two biggest goals, basically, the things that
successful
you're
family, successful
the
career.
right, like your career, you have huge aspirations for, huge goals. You're always thinking about it. It's on your heart. It's on your mind. And then on the flip side, Douglas, your fiance. Sorry, I haven't brought up Douglas yet. Douglas is one of my favorite people ever. Then you got your daughter. So you got this family aspect that's on your heart and on your mind every day. And this career, obviously, it means a lot to you. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been working your tail off to get to where you're at today. So both of these things kind of encompass what you care about and what drives you the most, what you've invested in the most.
Absolutely. Yes. And so yeah, about so it's like what, May now? About 8 months ago, 9 months ago, I guess, I got kind of blindsided by some stuff, like some personal family matters, and it really shook me to my core. And it just kind of put me in this like downward spiral. And I told my supervisor at the time, as the wing resiliency coordinator, like, I don't think I'm gonna be able to come to work for a few days, and like I'm gonna just take my computer and telework. I'm kind of gave her shed some light on what was going on, and she said, "Hey, take the time that you need." And so I was just making it by, and so that, one out of two, my personal life and then my career life. My personal life took a pretty big hit, and some things were going on in it, and I moving forward, a couple of weeks later, we had this like trip planned, and I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to go on it or not. And I just made a last minute decision to go on it, because everybody that was also, it was for my best friend's birthday. It was her 30th birthday. And we had already like paid the tickets and all that other stuff. But with everything else going on, I just emotionally didn't think I had it in me to go. And so I was hesitant about it, about going, didn't really secure childcare or anything because I wasn't going to take my daughter. And then I got a text from my best friend's now fiance, and he just said like, "Hey, everybody dropped out," so I couldn't also be the one to drop out. I had just started NCOA, but it was distance learning. And so everything, just like the trip in itself, just kind of fell to the wayside. And so I got that text, and I was like, "Oh crap, like I have to go now,"
So
and
like this friend shares friends with you, and then you realize that no one's going to be there for this person,
yeah, exactly. And I
basically.
mean, the money loss of like with the plane tickets and all that other stuff wasn't that big of a deal for me, because I really just would have felt better being home at that time. That's how I felt. Like I just kind of wanted to keep closed in my bubble. Um, but I couldn't, I mean, I couldn't imagine like having her knowing that all these people, and then when I got there, because I did end up going, but when I got there, like she found out that everybody else was supposed to go, because it was a surprise for her, and everybody else had dropped out. So all in all, like, it sucks, but we'll get there. Anyways, finding that out about that situation and that trip, I just like quickly, I mean, I didn't even get childcare secured until like the day before we left. And so it was like 2 days out that I made that decision to go. And at that time, there was like COVID policy of like, you need to get everybody and their mama's signature to go anywhere. And that in itself was really overwhelming, especially on such a short turnaround. I just didn't do it. Like I didn't do the COVID policy aspect. I told my supervisor where I was going. She was all about like, she knew where I was going. Um, and so I just kind of justified that also being an NCOA, distance learning. I justified that I was still going to be going into class. And my supervisor knew where I was. So I just decided to go because to me at that time, everything else that I was dealing with, it felt like it was too much to, I guess, kind of go through that proper channels to even figure out where to start because I hadn't taken leave yet. So I had no idea how to start it. I didn't know where to get the COVID sheets. I didn't know where to get the how to contact public health in terms of like COVID specific things. I kept hearing like people struggling with that as well. So it just kind of felt overwhelming. So I left. I went to see my best friend and surprise her for her birthday. And um, she found out that like all these other people kind of bailed on her last minute. And she, I saw that hurt. So even with everything the way that it ended up playing out, like I'm glad that I was still able to be there for her because I couldn't have done that. I couldn't have been that one last person to bail out, and then she had nobody, except for her now fiance. But I showed up in class and everything. Like I never missed any class. Did all my homework, did my assignments, and all of that. So I really wasn't anticipating any kind of concern at that point either. I still wasn't like processing.
Wasn't like a huge deal. You're like, hey, I'm doing what I'm supposed to
Yeah.
do. My supervisor knows. But in all honesty, if you would have tried to figure all that out and route it, it wouldn't have been enough time. And I think you probably knew that deep down inside, like, hey, if I do go through this the right way, it's not even possible. But maybe I
That's
can do it
how
in a
it felt.
way where I'm safe, my people know where I'm at, and I'm still meeting my responsibilities. Maybe I can just wing this.
And that's kind of exactly, honestly, that's 1,000% what kind of went through my head was like, well, I mean, people know and whatnot. And so, and I'm doing my responsibilities, right? So I was waking up because we went to everything was East Coast time. But we were over in California, Nevada, Tahoe, Lake Tahoe area. So, I mean, I was waking up at like 5 a.m, like on vacation so that I could be in class, on vacation, if I will, but I was making that my priority, so I definitely justified it. Regardless, I know as an NCO, it's my responsibility, and so I own it all day long. It's like, I'm not trying to cheat the system. I'm not trying to make excuses, but my mental health at that point just didn't support one more burden, I guess, one more checklist of things to do.
Yeah, when
And
you're vulnerable like that, they call it like decision fatigue or something,
yeah.
where like your ability to make the right decisions is just too much for your brain to ask of your brain at that time. And you're going to look for an easier path versus truly thinking it through because you're kind of vulnerable.
We naturally take shortcuts in like just our everyday processes, but even in our bigger decision making, we'll take shortcuts if it's cognitive. It's a cognitive thing, but we take shortcuts just to be able to, for our brain to kind of handle things, to accept and process and adjust things more easily. So yes, I sat there and I just kind of made a quick decision and, got on the plane and left. And when we came back, you talk about Douglas, James, he, we both experienced like COVID like symptoms, but we didn't realize that. We thought that they were allergies. The only reason why we thought that they might be COVID was we lost like taste. And so we got back and he ended up going to go get a COVID test, and it came back positive a few days later. And, I was quarantining anyways because I was in my class, so I was still at the house. And it came back and I routed it up and just let my supervisor know. And so, she had to do her responsibility, and she routed it up as well. And I let her know like, hey, I wasn't on official leave. I just told you about it and stuff. And so That got routed up as well. And so it just kind of came out that I wasn't on official leave but I was out of the area. And so I got called into the first sergeant's office. At first, I wasn't concerned before then, like when I just talked to her, but afterwards I was just like, like starting to get a little worried, I guess. I think it kind of processed that like, oh, she, like this got pushed up in a negative way, and anyways, I got called into the first sergeant's office, and it was he kind of talked a little bit about it, and I just kind of started like just telling him everything, and just laid it all out there about what was going on in my personal life, what's going on here, like why I made the decision I did, and everything. And so, he was about to read me my rights, but I waived it. I just was like, no, you don't need to. I was always the person that was like, I would never do something to put my stripe on the line, to put my livelihood on the line. And so I just, like, in my mind, I was like, I'm going to tell the absolute truth, And so I didn't need, in my mind, I didn't need my rights read to me.
He must have been doing that because you were self-incriminating.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I think is probably what flagged that in his mind. There must have been some law or rule, and he probably was just trying to make sure you were aware of what you were saying.
Yeah, and I just was like, no, like I just want to tell the truth, and so I did.
Well, it's going to come out eventually. I mean, you got multiple parties involved. There's no getting around it.
Like, I'm not going to sit here and lie about something. Like I made a poor decision. And yeah, I'm concerned about what that looks like now. Like I didn't think about it then. Here's everything that's kind of going on.
So when he read you your rights or offered to, that had to have really just kind of shook you at that moment.
I still don't think I registered it.
Really?
I don't think I like, yeah, like I won't lie. Like I've never gotten in trouble before. I've never gotten so much as a single piece of paperwork, And so I'm a hard worker. I try my best to do the right thing. And so I think like, even though I knew that I did the wrong thing, I think I still just didn't process like the seriousness of it yet.
I think we also subconsciously like balance it in our brains, because I went through this. We're at Whiteman. I felt, I made a mistake, which I talked about in a previous episode, where I messed up the change of command for the wing. And my lapse in judgment came from the fact that I've done so much good, and I was viewed in such a positive light that I, at my core, felt I could do no wrong. I wasn't consciously thinking that.
Right. It's not like and this is all like me reflecting back on everything now. In the moment, I wasn't like, oh, like I can't do wrong. That's not the way I was thinking, but 100%, I agree with your statement that like, I'm viewed highly. I work my butt off. I really care about things. Like I try to do the right thing. And so me telling the truth is just another like, well, I'm trying to do the right thing. And it might have made it worse. I don't know. But either way, it was out there, right? And so I felt like subconsciously that like it can't really go that wrong, like people know my character overall. But it's just it just goes back to show like, and I've got other stories for friends of mine that I know, where they also like headed in a really great direction, thought of highly thought of, and ended up making a mistake and like still ended up losing a stripe, right? Like and that's like at the master level, losing a stripe to tech, and a tech losing a stripe to staff. I know different people that have gone through this, especially after telling my story and talking to them. You just kind of realize you're not invincible, and you just kind of, sometimes you might lose sight of that. But yeah,
I think that's a dangerous mindset to be in. Looking back on my own, it's a complacent mindset, because you think that there's this scale that's like this, like, I've done so much good that if I did something bad, it would kind of balance out, but it's not true. There really is no scale.
Right. Yes, there's no balancing this out, like you make a bad decision, you have to be held accountable for it. And I think it kind of took me a little bit to accept that. We talked earlier, I don't know if it was on camera or not, about the stages of grief, and well, just about grief in general, but there's different stages of grief, and and different, there's losses, and you grieve different things. And through this whole process, I was really like grieving a lot, like my loss of identity, like the loss of um, potential strike because I didn't know what was going to come, my loss of certainty because I was very certain about like where I was headed, um, my reputation, just a whole bunch of different things because now there's different squadrons and people from different levels involved in this. And I was highly embarrassed and shamed. Like I was shameful. Like to tell you that's like especially because you don't really know the whole background story, but there's a lot of embarrassment and a lot of shame that went into this, and just kind of having to lay everything out. And so, having this first sergeant read me my rights, like I didn't process right then, but then I had to go talk to I was just kind of in limbo for weeks, and then eventually like my commander talked to me, and very grateful for her, because even
That's a great commander.
yeah, Colonel Barkalow, she's definitely something special. Uh, she in the mix of everything, it was like a Friday night at like 5 or 6 o'clock, and I was like at my office, like just like I lost it. Like I just was having a really hard time. And so my supervisor called her, like maybe she called down and then she ended up talking to her. At some point in time though, like Colonel Barkalow came over to the office and started talking to me, and I just like she just was very comforting and like, hey, we're going to get through this regardless of what this looks like. It doesn't matter. Like, we're going to get through this. We are here for you. You're going to succeed. It's going to be fine. Like, kind of just like calmed me down a little bit to let me know, like, hey, yeah, we're going to have to hold you accountable, but we're still on your side. So I didn't feel, in that moment, it kind of took off a little bit of that pressure, but it doesn't mean that I didn't sit with that shame for a while and that embarrassment for a while.
Was there a
Um,
particular moment where that shame like really kicked into overdrive?
um, I would say there was a series of moments. I would say initially having to confront her or confront my leadership team about it. Um, sitting there and telling my ADC, because I went to the ADC. So telling my,
So just
the,
like finding yourself in this position where you're like, how is this me? Like you've helped so many airmen in that situation. You've always been there for them. You wrote letters for them. You've led them to the ADC, and then suddenly you're in the chair, and your brain's like, what is happening?
yeah, I would say probably putting my blues on
Oof.
and behind, yep, I had to go eventually, report to the commander and, full service dress behind the commander's desk, and walk in, do the salute. I haven't done that since basic training, and um, it was. I think at that point, I think at that point it was real before, but it just was. I don't know. It was very like serious in my mind at that point. Is when it just kind of like all right, like I know for a fact because I had already gotten pulled back from the wing. In the mix of this, I got pulled back from the wing. I was also in a fellowship program for global strike, for striker titans, and I got pulled from that as well, and that was really embarrassing too. So when I say like little bits of it, it just kind of came over time. I didn't even know I got pulled from it um until I don't really remember what it was that tipped me off to it, but I reached out to the coordinator for Striker Titans fellowship program, and he was like, "Yeah, we got an email from your command chief saying that you were pulled, that they needed to pull you." So that was very embarrassing too, because now there's like 8 people that was part of this fellowship that now all know that something happened because I got pulled from it.
Hmm.
Um, and then just having to reiterate and retell my story about stuff, sitting down and typing out a rebuttal, asking for some form of like leniency or consideration to what I was going through was another thing. But I had to get very embarrassingly detailed, and I didn't feel comfortable with that, but I had to because my career is it's my livelihood. And I was offered in Article 15. I don't think we covered that, but yeah, I was offered in Article 15 for leaving without for absent without leave, and then not doing the COVID policies. So it's kind of like a double hitter, if you will. So, yeah.
Holy cow. I'm so sorry you went through that. And you're dealing with the family matter. That's still happening. There's only, what, a 3-week gap between the family matter and the career situation. So now you're, both the things you value the most have been threatened, and you have to rethink both.
Yeah, it really it kind of just felt like the walls were closing in. Everything was kind of crumbling, in my opinion, like falling to the ground, if you will. And I think, honestly, I think the whole career aspect situation really impaired my ability to continue processing everything else that was going on in my personal life. Like that just got kind of put on hold. And then I had to focus all my attention on like my defense and being able to, be able to make it through this aspect, right? Make it through the offering of the Article 15, meeting with my ADC, going and telling my story to the commander, doing, I can't remember what they call it, but it's like I had to go up and just have I spoke to her and to everybody else that was in the room and just told them everything that I was feeling, like what I wanted, what I was hoping for out of the situation, what I've learned. And that too was embarrassing and just kind of difficult because it was very emotional. And then it was just a waiting game of like, where is this going to go? Am I going to get an Article 15? Am I going to lose a stripe? What is my EPR going to look like? Like I was very concerned about my EPR. If I got an Article 15, that's going to be a referral EPR, and that would be setting me back for years. And an LOR could still be a referral. So I had no idea what direction she was going to go. I didn't know if I sounded like I was making excuses. I didn't know if I sounded like, because ultimately in my mind, you're responsible for your decisions, and there are, things that cloud your judgment, but we are all responsible for our decisions at the end of the day. And so like, I didn't want to sound like I was making excuses, but I wanted to give context to like why my decision making was clouded, and that like, again, this is not characteristic of me. So it was a difficult time. She ended up not giving me an Article 15. She just gave me an LOR, and I feel very fortunate to also not have a referral EPR. I didn't get a UIF or a control roster, which was a possibility as well. So I was able to continue my education, but it reflects very much so on my EPR. And so while I was very much expecting to make master this year, I know for a fact that that is not even a possibility. That was not going to be a possibility. And it came out. Master results were released last week, and I did not make master. But I think everybody has adversity, right? Everybody has issues. Everybody goes through different things in their career, in their personal life, and they may stumble and fall as well. But I've definitely learned that it's about how you get up and how you move forward from that.
Right. When everything's going right, it feels like you just got it all figured out. You know what I mean? I felt like that before. I was like, oh, I got this figured out, this thing called life. I'm killing it.
Yeah.
Like it's done. It's over. I win. And then a wrench gets thrown into that. And then you realize like how I act now is kind of like the real me, how you act in that negative consequence, arena, how you go about handling the dark moments. That's another side of you too, just like the positive moments and how you act then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When things are going great, I mean, you're going to reflect that, but when things are hard, really like how you maneuver through that, what you do in spite of what's going on, that's really characteristic of who you are as a person. And so I struggled. Don't get me wrong. I think the biggest struggle was my recognizing like how poor my mental health was. My whole world just kind of fell apart. All these dreams, goals, and expectations that I had for what my life was to look like was now met with a lot of ongoing challenge, rehabilitation in terms of like career and trying to come back from that, and just trying to make the best out of the cards that were dealt. But that's not the way I looked at it, not at that time. I looked at it as like, woe is me, but I put a lot of other things first before my mental health. And I think that really affected me for a while. I also felt like I couldn't really outwardly discuss my mental health, and how much I was struggling, because I'm the wing resiliency coordinator. I'm supposed to be the professional resiliency person. I know all the skills, I know the ins and the outs. And so if anybody is supposed to be resilient through hard times, it's me. And not only that, but my master's degree is in mental health. Like, this is what I study. This is not just like an academic goal, but this is like literally what I do in my life because of the resiliency aspect as well. So I just felt a lot of shame in saying like, I need help, but I came around to it, probably like midway through the, I don't even know, like the commander making her decisions and stuff like that. Through all that whole process, I kind of came around to understanding that like, I need to get help or it's just going to get worse, because there were definitely periods of time where I remember distinctly two different times. One of the times was we were driving my daughter back from piano, and like I was pulling out onto the main highway, but there was a car coming, and I just had this like split second thought in my head, like, what if I just drive in front of it? Because I was driver's side and the car would have hit me. And so I was just like, I could just drive out in front of it. Like I had this like very real thought, and like that scared me, but I just kind of like pushed it off. And then maybe a few days later, I couldn't sleep and I had some extremely like morbid thoughts. And these are things that people don't talk about. We talk about resiliency and your ability to cope and go through things, but we don't talk about like, sometimes it's really hard, to find that one thing to hold on to. We talk about like, just find that one like that one little bit of thing that's like that you can use for gratitude for that day. Like, even if it's just like waking up. But sometimes the truth is, sometimes we don't want to wake up, and it doesn't mean we want to die, but we just don't want to face the day. And I don't think we talk about that enough. I don't think we talk about that it's okay to have those thoughts, as long as you're addressing it and you don't stay in those thoughts. So I was having that thought a lot. Like, I kept waking up praying it was a dream. I kept waking up like wishing myself into another reality. I didn't eat. For all of you that know me, like, I go to the gym all the time. I competed in bodybuilding and all of that. And like, I'm still really just barely getting to the gym now. Like, it's taken me 8 months and I'm still not consistent in getting back to the gym. I go maybe 2 times a week. And that's also with demands of school and stuff, but like, it's definitely still tied to my mental health, and the initial bit of everything really derailed my motivation to be in the gym, because it was the place that I could think about everything. And that was too heavy for me. So I think that that's a stigma we need to get away from, is like, hey, it's okay to not, it's okay to have the means or have the knowledge and not really know how to apply, and that's kind of where I found myself, was, hey, I got all this knowledge and I do know how to apply, but not for something this extreme. And so I got help, and I got a therapist, and I still see her every 2 weeks typically. And then I went to mental health, and I called them and with a full-on breakdown and was telling them that like, I didn't know how I was going to make it through the day. And I was like, I don't want to die. I just don't want to be here. I don't want to live right now. I don't want to be awake. And they got me in that same day, and they talked to me, and they met with me, like, I want to say like maybe a couple days later and maybe a week later. But after a while, I started to feel better, and I was like, all right, like, I'm good. I don't need to meet with you guys at mental health anymore. And they closed out my case. So.
Wow, good on you for speaking up, because that situation's so scary, because it's out of your control at that point, right? Like, when you have all these barriers of things you can deal with and the resiliency that you've kind of built in your own mind, but there's certain situations that just kind of blow past all that.
Mhm.
It gets through to you. It really stabs you in the worst way. And suddenly you just feel like you're not in control of it anymore, right? Like it's just going where it wants to go at that point.
That's
And it's
exactly
at,
how.
yeah, and it's at that point where you need an external assistance. You've
Mhm.
tried, it's gone past your defenses. You need help now. And I felt the same way like when I almost lost my son, like, and the nurse came in like crying. The nurses were panicked. The nurses were mourning. And at that point I thought this it's over. Like I thought about like an empty room that we decorated and how that's going to feel, and this is going to be part of our, this struggle is going to be with us for the rest of our life, losing this little boy.
Mhm.
And I felt this numbness and panic wash over me in a way that I've never felt in my life. I texted like my whole family, like immediately, like, I need help. I need someone out here, because I was about to lose it.
Mhm.
And like it scared my family, like the way I was like texting. But in that particular moment, I knew like it was out of my control. Like where my head was going, what was going to happen, it was
Mhm.
just out of my control. I needed something external to help guide me through it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then I'm sure you've probably seen other people that have lost their kids, you know? Like that's a real thing that like I know for a fact I've seen several people that have lost, their children, whether at birth or like, from SIDS or something. Like there's so many different things. And just the same as I've seen people go through this type of issue, right? They get in trouble, their career kind of gets derailed. You see it and you always think it's not going to happen to you. You feel like you're immune to it. So you're sad for them. But then when you're living in it, you just don't realize how much out of control it can cause you to be, how emotional it can be. Like there's just no words to put, especially I couldn't even imagine like potentially losing my daughter. So like everybody goes through these things. I think that's just another thing that we don't discuss very much. Again, like we talked about in emotional intelligence before. But people go through all these things, and you as a leader or your friends, family, like you have to be able to kind of meet them where they're at and get on their level and recognize that like you may not be going through that, but you could. You're not immune to it, so you got to be able to be that force to help them out. And um I'm assuming that your family was able to come out and meet with you.
Yeah, my dad and my stepmom flew out like immediately, and it definitely made a world's difference.
Absolutely. And like I'm sure hopefully your leadership was pretty understanding and stuff. And so
They
I
were.
think, yeah, I think things like that. I mean, if we're able to meet people where they're at, I think we'd have a lot better outcomes with people when they do go through stuff, even if it is something, like uh, me and my poor choice, um, still meeting somebody where they're at and being able to show them that you're still in support of them, that you still, even if it's a bad outcome and I got that Article 15 or whatever, like still being able to support me through that is important versus being a person of judgment. And I felt like there's a lot of judgment, but I know that there wasn't. Not so much. I just felt that because, I internalized everything that was going on and just assumed that,
You felt shame, and
yeah,
your
yeah.
mind struggling to figure out where that shame's coming from, and it's
Mhm.
really easy to just assume, oh, it's because everyone's looking at me like this.
That's very much how it was. Like I remember going to the gym and I saw this other lieutenant colonel that I know but don't know well. But I just saw him and I saw him looking at me, but I would have sworn he was like looking at me a lot, like, oh man, you suck, like, oh, you got in trouble, like, things like that. Guarantee you he probably doesn't even know anything about it. But I was just so hyper focused and like hyper vigilant to everything around me that I just assumed everybody knew. I assumed everybody was still thinking about it. I assumed people were still like, wow, she sucks. Like, I can't believe she let this. And the truth is, most people didn't even know that it happened.
So you had that lens on,
Mhm.
that everything that happened to you, every interaction was bounced off that lens.
Yep.
How do you get out of that? So like one of the last things I want to talk to you about here is just, you're doing better now.
Yeah.
You're on the path, as you said, you're going back to the gym. Like where does one begin to build themselves back up out of that situation or something similar to it?
So I, I got handed the LOR, and I had questions and all of that, asked my questions, got my answers and stuff. But everyone kept telling me, like, hey, it's just going to make you a better leader. And in my mind, I'm like, no, like, this is going to keep me from being a leader. I want to be a first sergeant. This is going to take, it's going to take forever for me to make masters so I can become a first sergeant. But a few weeks later, maybe a month later, like, I really started to like come around to that idea. Like, it is going to make me a better leader, because I think about all my airmen and how they may or may not come into trouble where, they make a bad decision. And now I can empathize with them having to go stand behind a commander's desk, because that's a very surreal feeling, and I never would have been able to do that before. And I want to be a first sergeant. So I just kind of held on to like their words. And even though I didn't quite buy into it yet, I worked as if I did. I went back to, my duty section, and, from the wing to my new duty section, started trying to learn, trying to kind of get settled in it. I got pulled out of NCOA when all of this was happening. So I got pulled out like a week before NCOA graduation happened. So it kind of sucked because I did all the work and all that other stuff, and then I had to redo it, but I got selected again. So I got selected to do NCOA in November. I think it was the tail end of November. I got to do it again. And I exceeded, I had to redo every single assignment. They had all my copies. I talked to my instructor, and he was like, you can't use any of the same material. You need to do everything all over again. So I had to redo absolutely everything.
Wow.
And it was time consuming because I was also in graduate classes as well. I wasn't expecting to get selected so soon. But I walked away with academic achievement, which is a really big accomplishment. And that just kind of put me on this path of feeling successful, even in that little bit, because although I couldn't control the outcome of what the commander decided, I could control how I reacted to that outcome. And my choice was every single day they're going to realize, one, that they made a good decision, that this is not something that's characteristic of me. And so I don't want them to regret showing some form of leniency, if you will. They could have definitely given me an Article 15, but for whatever reason, they chose not to. They chose to consider what was going on. And so I didn't want to make them regret that decision. So there was that, but also how I respond to it is going to be influential to the people that when I got comfortable talking about it, that they would see and look back and, one, hopefully know that they didn't even know that I was going through something. I wanted it so that they could see that life may be really hard. You may need to take a knee, but if you can keep going and you can keep pushing through, you can be successful regardless of what's handed to you. And that's kind of like where my mentality was. So the whole time I was just focused on being there for my people, learning my job, and finishing NCOA, which I did. I came back, and then my supervisor who was over the shop, she actually was gone on and off for about 5 months. So I got to step in that lead role. And so I ran the shop, barely knowing what I was doing. But it was an excellent challenge for me to learn, to grow. I was holding an E7 role, even though I was an E6, and I feel like I just demolished all trust that they had in me, but I still got that chance. You know what I mean? And I owned it. Well, when I made mistakes, I was like, hey, or if I didn't know what I was doing, I asked, and when I celebrated every single day that I walked away and I know I did something right. And so I think that was what also helped me, was those little celebrations every single day when I was like, you know what? We didn't set the shop on fire today. So it was a good day. And then also just looking bigger picture, they kept telling me this is going to make me a better leader. They knew I want to be a first sergeant, and I got to go to the first sergeant's course in this time period too. And just kind of hearing how some of these other first sergeants have paperwork in their past. So yeah, all in all, I think what got me to the point though of where I got comfortable talking about it was I won NCO of the quarter at the group this last quarter. So for the first quarter, and I Absolutely. Like I felt, I don't know what's a good word for it, but I just felt like achieved, you know, like I, they do trust me, that I can make a mistake and recover, that this doesn't need to be held over my head forever. And really the only person that's going to get in my way is me. And my chief actually told me that. I talked to my chief and she was like, the only person that's going to get in your way is you. And I kind of held on to that too. So I had really supportive leadership through everything. I was very quiet about it up until recently because of all that shame. And I still feel it, you know, I still feel embarrassed. I still have, I mean, just a couple of weeks ago, I went and talked to one of my chiefs and trying to see about like, you know, the status of the LOR because we're coming up on a year. We're like 9 months, 8 months or whatever. Just wanted to kind of get an idea. We have a change of command coming up, and they were like, no, it's got to stay in for a year. And like, it still hurt, but I still have that shame, and I can still see that I've got that like embarrassment and stuff, but I need to learn to own it. I need to learn to like allow it to be my story. And I got asked by the commandant to go and speak to ALS. And so I got to do that too and tell my story there. So just kind of finding different ways to accept it and find little milestones to create for yourself to know that you are succeeding where you are, you know. I think that's probably the most important thing I've learned.
Wow, Kim, I think you nailed it. I mean, everything you're saying is makes sense. You know, you went back to basics, you know, like it sounds like you at some point had to accept it, be thankful for the outcome.
Yeah.
It could have been worse, looking at it that way, setting your ego aside, and then just starting from scratch, doing a good job, being there for people, you know, just focusing on what you can control, capitalizing on that. And little by little, it sounds like you started building your confidence back up little by little by showing yourself what you got. And then when you got the award, you were basically validated. Like you were like, okay, I am on the right path. All these things I'm doing are being noticed and I'm on the right path. It was validating. And then that gave you even more confidence. And now you're speaking about it. You know, you're being invited for people to hear your story. You're doing this podcast now. And
Yes.
so like I'm proud of you, like for real. I can't tell you how many people I've known that something traumatic has happened and they just went off the deep end and they did get in their own way, you know, repeatedly. It's really easy. You create this momentum of this downward spiral. It's so hard to stop that momentum to keep continuing to go down, to stop it, and then to try to build momentum back up. It takes an incredible person to do that. And so I want to thank you, Kim, so much for sharing that story with us. I'm proud of you. I've always looked up to you, and now I just look up to you even more. I think you're going to be a first shirt one day, and I think you're going to impact a tremendous amount of lives with everything you've been through and just giving us the tools and the path to not quit or give up on ourselves. But Kim, my final question to you would be, when you got out of that commander's office in your blues, the you now in the future, in the present day, what would you tell, if you could pass a message to her when she left that office, what would you tell her?
I would tell her that I would probably tell her to breathe. I know that sounds very simple. I could, you know, say that it's out of your control and to just accept what happens and move forward. But just breathe, because in that moment, like, you don't even know what's going on. You walk out of that office and you've got no idea what's coming next. There's so much uncertainty. And if you can just kind of breathe through it and take it moment by moment, it could be minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day. Take it in whatever increments you can accept it in, you know, and then continue to push forward, you know, realign your goals. What does your next step look like? But just breathe until you really know what's going to happen.
Got it. Kim, thank you so much for sharing that story. I know a lot of people need to hear that story and they're going to appreciate it as much as I did. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. Thank you all the listeners who've listened up to this point. This was the hero's journey of Kim Desilus. We are out.